It is one thing to come up with a brilliant innovation and to break into a new market. It's another thing to keep innovating year after year for a half century. In our next panel, we look at how one company has kept the innovation engine turning over in a segment of the business they invented that it went on to become nearly a commodity. That company is Hughes Network Systems. It was founded as Digital Communications Corporation in 1971 by a group of engineers that included Hall of Fame members John Puente and Bert Edelson. They started in the proverbial garage and within 6 years had 250 employees and more than $10 million in revenue. In 1985, the company invented the Very Small Aperture Satellite Antenna, or VSAT, and after a series of acquisitions was bought by Hughes Aircraft and renamed Hughes Communications. Joining us today from Hughes Network Systems is Hall of Fame member and Executive Vice President and General Manager for North America, Paul Gaske, and two members of our 20 under 35, Principal Engineer Gaurav Bhatia, who was honored in 2019, and Senior Principal Engineer Rohit Seshadri, who was honored in 2011. And serving as Paul's wingman in this discussion of innovation is Adrian Morris, Executive Vice President of Engineering. So Paul, first question goes to you. Hughes Network Systems has been making technology breakthroughs almost continuously since its founding. What do you think are the key ingredients that go into building an organization that can do this continuous innovation?
Well, I think, Robert, probably the number one thing you have to start with is the obvious ingredient of very bright people. So you try to hire people that you think are intelligent, they have good experience, and they, when you select them, that they seem creative to start with. But then what you do is you put them with your most creative people. So they learn from day one to think for themselves, to come up with ideas, to follow those ideas. And then ultimately, of course, we have to give them the freedom to do that, so that when they have good ideas or they have ideas, we let them carry those out to fruition. And by doing that, generation after generation, you get better and better at the innovation aspect of the design process that we go through.
You said something there about, think for themselves. Of course, you hire bright people and they're capable of doing that, but there's a level of permission involved in that. And how does that get across to, your relatively new hires who are coming on board trying to figure out where they fit in?
Well, I think part of that is in the mentoring process, because I think what you want to do when you assign a project to a young person starting is you want to prescribe the boundaries of what the thing's trying to achieve, but you don't want to give away too many hints of how to do it. That allows them to go figure it out. It allows them to own what they've designed, and the amount of buy-in from that person into carrying the project through to fruition, is tremendously higher than here's 6 ways you should do it exactly like this, step 1, 2, 3, 4. That's not as fulfilling to people generally. So they'll own their creative effort. And I think when they've been treated that way, the next generation of people that come in under them will also be treated that way. So it's an important thing that started really in our founding. Some of our people like Gene Gabbard, Pradman Call, people like that, that's how they operated. They basically said, hey, here's a problem. Here's some stuff you need to know, and come back in a couple of weeks with an answer for me. Right. And so that just built year after year. And that's how you get to that stage.
It's pretty demanding. Adrian, you of course have to run this day to day in terms of this never-ending technology innovation. That's a really demanding thing that Paul just outlined. How does it work from your perspective in terms of encouraging this continuous innovation?
Thanks, Robert. So just to follow up on some details from Paul, we recruit from the best schools, and we use Hughes ex-alumni from those schools to do the recruiting. And that's been really successful, where we go back to the places that Paul and others went to school and go back and recruit people from the same place. When we get a new grad into the building, into Hughes, we encourage an immediate immediacy of getting him a technical assignment straight away, within him being here just a couple of weeks. And we follow that up with mentoring, and immediate mentoring also. And the mentoring doesn't only cross engineering boundaries, but we give them exposure to business development people, operations people, and engineering people, because as Paul stated, we want them to figure out why we're doing something and what's needed to accomplish the particular project. We have a system and service environment at Hughes, so we don't just build equipment, but we actually run services. So it gives the young engineer an opportunity to get customer exposure very early in his career. And a young engineer, we will encourage him to be assigned to multiple projects in his first 5 years, because we want to broaden the experience. So we think that's really important. If he's here for 5 years, he should have not, in most cases, been assigned to 2, 3, even 4 projects as he started. And then we promote strong technical base across all of Hughes. Our business people are often originally from the engineering group or from somebody else's engineering group, but a strong base in technical expertise for our business leaders, our marketing leaders, our operations leaders. So that makes the dialogue much more rich when we're trying to figure out what's the problem we want to solve and why are we trying to solve it.
The sales engineer, the business engineer, they are the foundation of his business. And I always kind of just look at it in awe, because it's such an odd combination of skills. And yet when it works, it works. Gaurav, I want to turn to you for a moment. You have been responsible for, and this is why you were honored with our 20 under 35, you've been responsible for a whole series of innovative developments for that next gen Jupiter system, the modems in use in that system. What's the experience as part of the engineering team of creating new technologies and getting them accepted for a product?
Yeah, so like Adrian said, when I came in, I think within the first week, the thing I was tasked to do was build a satellite delay emulator. This was for our spaceway system. And obviously, I mean, when you come out of college, you're not thinking of how a satellite delay emulator is going to be built, the hardware pieces, the software and everything. So I guess it got the necessary, I think you pick up the necessary skills from there, right? So, and then there's the mentoring and advanced mentoring that Hughes does. So I kind of benefited from doing multiple projects in a short span of time. I started as a board design engineer, so had to do CAD stuff, go to factory, development and everything. Then I worked on the Jupiter gateway design. So that was the first generation of our gateway, and the goal was to reduce the size of it by an order of 2 of magnitude. So it brought up pretty interesting challenges for not just the server platforms, the virtualization techniques that had just started coming, the synchronization of timing across these multiple gateways and everything. So I think I was lucky, and frankly, I'm not unique at Hughes. Like Hughes has a engineering organization where you are actually promoted to move across different teams and get new experiences, especially early on. So I think 4 years down the line, I finally moved into the satellite modems development. And when I reached there, basically, we were at that point, I think, doing OQPSK, and demands from customers had started to come in for linear 2, 8, 16 APSK. Our advanced development group had created SCMA, the scrambled code multiple access. So I think there were a lot of opportunities because of either the customer needs or customer feedback, whether it be external customers or our own internal operations organizations, the contribution from our R&D group, and just internally our team, because we were closest to our own project, and we constantly keep up with the research material that's out there from either the industry or academia. So it kind of gives us a good feeling to a good idea as to where we can innovate and where it's more, I guess, productive to put our time right now. And we get the blessing from our engineering management who are kind enough to actually allow us to pursue these different innovations across the same product line or new product lines. So I guess it's a very rewarding experience, and it's still continuing to date.
It's funny what you describe, what sounds like a very small organization, right? The intimacy of being able to work together as a team, to get access to senior management when you need it and so forth. And yet, of course, Hughes is not a very small organization. How does that work?
So I guess the open door policy is definitely there. So not just within my team, like I'm part of the advanced modern design, the signal processing group, but anytime we have to bounce ideas of our R&D group, we just stop by their offices to, just have a chat, and they're kind enough to give their time to us on that. But also across like the hardware, software, firmware verticals and the RF team, because you work on so many different projects early on, you get to know so many people. And so now you're on a personal bond basis with them. So hallway conversations or even just, chats talking about our own products. It has allowed me and a lot of my teammates also to kind of have that, I guess, extra oomph needed to create that differentiation in our product line. And everybody, like Adrian said, has a very deep technical expertise generally in their field of work. So that helps, that we are not just floundering, but we are actually trying to contribute to our overall engineering design goals. So,
well, I'm sure your boss is glad to hear that you're not just floundering. Rohit, I recall back to 2011 meeting you, presenting you with an award back then, and you had not been working for Hughes for a very long time at that point, but you were already representing the company to a very high-level standards organization, the DVB Return Communication Systems, RCS group in Europe, and you'd come up with a solution, and with the company's support, you presented it as, to become part of the RCS standard. Again, it was remarkable, or at least seemed remarkable to the people who selected you. What was the problem you were trying to solve, and why was an open standard the right way to go with that, particularly in an industry which is not known for its love of open standards?
Right. So so I'd joined Hughes around that time, just out of graduate school. And if I recall, the problem that we were trying to address back then relates to terminals with low-cost power amplifiers. So generally speaking, these devices, especially if you drive them hard, tend to be nonlinear and cause a distortion in your signal, which introduces some problems in our link reliability. So what our group was looking at was to design transmission technologies that are inherently sort of resilient to these impairments. And by some coincidence, it turned out that the technical module of the standards committee was also looking at solutions for the same problem. So after having worked on the problem internally, our leadership team felt that, maybe it's a good idea. The solution, what we have is good enough to take to the standards body. And that's how we took it. And that's the process, that's the story, I guess, behind that development. But coming into Hughes, I was very much aware that, our engineering team has a very proud tradition of making very substantial contributions to standards body. So I was very much aware of that. So I was very excited, and I very much relished the opportunity of carrying the torch, if you will, of making meaningful contributions myself. And of course, I think it wasn't really one person. It wasn't really just me, actually. A lot of it built on the expertise in my group and in engineering. So it was really a team effort. I was the only one under 35 at that time, so I just ended up getting the award. So, yeah.
That's wonderful. Yes, you drew the short straw because of your age, eh?
Yes, pretty much.
Interesting. Coming back to Paul and Adrian, and this is a big general question, but where do innovations start at the company? I mean, Gaurav talked about customers, which of course is always a good place to get ideas, but what is the path that they have to go through to get accepted as a product or a service and actually be introduced? And I don't know which of you would like to address that.
Well, yeah, maybe I'll just say a couple words on that. I think first off, the culture is such that the path isn't very long. You can, as you heard the open door policy, you literally walk into your boss's office or somebody else or somebody in the business group. Say you're in engineering, you walk into the business heads, and you say, hey, I've got an idea. I think we can do X, Y, and Z. And they hear you out and say, hey, that's not a bad idea. Let's see if we can get a project going. Or, that sounds really good. We have something else going on. Let's plug it into that. And so we're always looking to try to do something better. So, any idea that sounds like, hey, that's better than what we're doing, or that's something new that'll make us better. I mean, it's easy to grab those ideas and move forward. So generally starting those kind of ideas is, just naturally arises in the organization. But there've been a couple of really, important examples where somebody had an idea that nobody had been working on at all. And in their own spare time, they were working on it, and they came in and gave a quick presentation on what they were doing, and people realized, hey, that is really a cool idea. Let's do something with that. And they immediately funded it and moved on. So it's really, it's spontaneous. You can't have a meeting and say, for the next hour, we're going to invent something cool. That's not how you innovate, right? And so you just leave it to all of your people to come up with their ideas, and you support them when they do have them.
Right, but and Adrian, just before we turn to you, but let me just push back on that a little bit, because you can't fund everything, and there has to be some kind of sets of bars that an idea needs to pass before you're going to put the company's resources into bringing it to market and hoping to sell it, or hoping to have it be an augmentation of an existing product that's going to be compelling. So what's that analysis like?
Well, I think, certainly there are the cases where you look at something and say it might be a good idea, and you spend a little bit more time studying whether it will be a good idea. And even the person that proposes it frequently comes back and says, well, I kind of missed, I didn't know you could do this and this in a different way, and so you'll tune the idea. Not many things are, if you will, dismissed out of hand, but at the same time, you will do some initial analysis. You don't just do everything that anybody suggests. I don't want to lead you to believe that. But generally, people have a thought of, hey, this is important and this is why it's important. That's why I want to suggest it. So you take it, as far as you can, and if it's good, it continues.
I just want to make sure you said that, so your employees didn't all come up to you and say, well, listen, I got this great idea for a used car, sales technique. Adrian, how about from your point of view?
So we inside the engineering group, we have a group of people called advanced development. And one of their jobs is to figure out what's the theoretical limits of networks and systems. And so mathematics and pure communication theory is a big deal for us, and very important because it sets one boundary. And then on the other hand, in our business and operations area, those folks have a great handle on what's practical, be it from a cost standpoint, in terms of what will the customer view the product at. So we've constantly matched those two bookends, if you will, together to try and come up with the right answer as to what Paul was talking about. But we do indeed do a lot of proof of concepts before we embark on a full product development.
Gaurav said something interesting in his reply about getting, of course, the great ideas coming from your customers. They tell you that they need something, they want something, there's something they're interested in. And indeed, it's very fertile ground. It can also, at least according to the Harvard professor Clayton Christensen, who's no longer with us, in his book Innovator's Dilemma, it's also potentially a trap, because you can innovate for your customers based on what they already know. And then you risk missing the idea that might be something your customers are not yet buying, but some other group of customers might buy, and eventually your existing customers will. So I'm curious, when you're balancing that innovation process, what do you do to try to find, the crazy ideas, or the ideas that appeal and that are selling into a market you're not currently selling to? So Gaurav, since it was your idea, why don't we start with you?
Yeah. So like I said, we, as a customer and feedback or any customer requests, unique use cases, they're definitely something that drive requirements or innovation on our end. But, and then the advanced development group here is another portion of it. But a lot of it also comes from when we have just our, design cycles, like we did the first Jupyter generation, then the second, and now we are at the third one. So these are generally very fertile times when you can throw in a lot of bigger ideas, and generally management will approve them because they give bigger quant of jump in throughput, better latency, higher reliability, those typical internet service metrics that we quantify the service with. And when the new team members come, like a lot of my time has been spent over the last few years mentoring and working closely with the new members of my team. And basically we just think, okay, looking at these research papers, what's the latest cool thing that's going on? And internally, we just say, okay, 10% of our time or something, we're gonna spend on, or just as a weekend reading or evening reading, we're gonna spend on looking at this. And then we have internal presentations. Now, it's like any other kind of research, right? 1 out of 10 will really stick. But it gives enough opportunity for us to be abreast of the research going on out there, because the schedules don't change. They will be tight because we want to be quick to market also. But this gives us a good opportunity to, I guess, create a bank of ideas for the next phase of whenever the product delivery is. So we typically, like Adrian said, if it's really good and we see immediate gains, or it's something that has a slightly longer gestational period, then we go into demo mode, and it might run for a few weeks, few months, whatever, and then everybody says upward, downward, and that's how finally it reaches, I guess, fruition as a product, or maybe next time, kind of thing. So I guess that's pretty much the gist of it from my end, at least.
That's very interesting. I mean, does the Jupyter system fit that model? I remember when I first, you first made the announcement, which goes back quite a ways now, and I looked at it and I was thinking about it, and I thought, wow, these folks have the courage to do something that actually Christensen said you have to do, which is to be willing to some extent to cannibalize what you've got to get to the next thing, because you could presumably have gone on selling VSAT systems forever, but this is an order, I'm not a mathematician, it's an order of magnitude above a VSAT system. So, I mean, Adrian and Paul, was this that kind of thing, or am I just misreading the tea leaves?
Well, so in addition to what Gaurav just said, by definition, we've got to be looking 5-10 years out in our decisions, and the customer is one really valuable input that we need to look at. But for example, 5G is coming on the horizon now. We've got to think through where that's going to be in the next 5 years in terms of what decisions we would make. We see a lot of what we call NGSO satellites, low orbiting satellites. We see that as a change that GEOs and non-NGSO satellites will see networks that are more hybrid by nature, because of that combination. So that's just 2 examples. And the third one, it's really important to us to hire new grads, because we get a bunch of new ideas and a new set of thinking from those folks every time a new set come in. And we've got to be open to different ways of looking at the future.
Yeah, I think, Robert, I'd add to that too, that when you think about activities that are just sort of evolutionary, you're improving a product, you have some good ideas, you make it a little bit better here, a little bit better there. And over time, the product as a whole moves forward and is better through innovation. That's the one path. But the path of sort of, if you will, revolutionary or major change, for instance, the Jupyter going to the high throughput satellites, for us, that was built out of an effort Adrian's team was involved in, which was building what was called the Spaceway satellite and satellite systems. And that was the first real, if you will, spot beam form systems with beam hopping and routers on a satellite. And it pushed all kinds of technologies. And as a spin out of that, when we said, hey, we need a lot more capacity for our customers, Adrian's team went and looked at it and went in a fixed spot beam approach with the Jupyter 1 and then Jupyter 2 and so on, because that could be realized in a short amount of time with a lot less R&D dollars. But it was very innovative and changed significantly what we could do for our customers. And so you're driving there where you've thought about it inside. No customer came and said, hey, why don't you give me some spot beam service, right? You have to be on your toes to come up with where the opportunities are.
Right. Rohit, this question is sparked by the fact that the last time I saw you was a decade ago when I presented you with one of our awards. It's characteristic of Hughes, in my experience of the company, that once people join the company, they tend to stay sometimes for decades. And that's, interestingly enough, not an idea we normally associate with a high rate of innovation. But in thinking about it, is that really kind of one of the company's secret sauces?
I would have to say yes, because I think innovation has to be built on a solid foundation. Because you can't build something on a weak foundation. I think on nothing. So I think, as Mr. Morris said, we have a group that my group does communication theory. There are other groups that have specialize in other aspects. So there is a lot of sort of a very rich and a varied knowledge base. So I think so. It's sort of a rich environment for a new person to come in and to have this already laid out, and so to build on top of that. So I think this breadth of experience, the knowledge in different different areas, really helps. So I think that it's a key, I would imagine, to why we've been so successful in pushing the envelope. Yes.
Well, when you got the best playground with the best toys, why would you ever want to leave? I want to take a moment now just to thank Paul Gaske, Adrian Morris, Gaurav, Bhatia, and Rohit Seshadri for taking us inside this remarkable innovation engine that is Hughes Network Systems.